Today, we're looking at a magenta ink by Wancher, Ebine Violet. I know, I said it was magenta, not purple. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that if you want to skip around, you can, but if you got the time, check out the entire video. You can follow me over on Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Italics Chaplin's tankard with an oblique italic nib to write for a day and to take my notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Additional papers will show up later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I have this ink in bottle form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it offers some nice spots of shading. Like the L in original is darker. The ER in Wancher is darker. The T in Violet slightly darker. So there are opportunities for shading with the stub. The extra fine is slightly lighter than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and plenty of very nice shading. Fox starts as a midtone, gets light, and gets very dark at the X. Jumps starts lighter, works its way to very dark at the M, and then into a midtone out of there. Brown starts dark and works its way light. Quick starts dark, gets midtone, gets very dark at the K again. 6 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a darker tone than the extra fine, slightly darker than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and some decent shading throughout, like Fox starts light and gets very dark at the X. Quick starts as a good mid-tone all the way through, and at the K, very dark. Over starts light and gets dark, and 13 seconds to dry. Now, the scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation looking far left to far right. And we get it in the writing sample. Tomoe River. No bleeding, and normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lighter tone than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade, 9 seconds to dry. The medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine, even quite a bit darker than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 32 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we got none. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and some very nice shade spots. The X in Fox quite a bit darker than the rest of the word. Over starts light, gets very dark on the on the V, mid-tone to E, getting darker on the E. Great place on shading here. Lazy goes mid-tone, very dark on A, back to mid-tone with the ZY. Nice. And 8 seconds to dry. Totally manageable. I don't think too many people are complaining about 8 seconds. The medium is a lot darker than the extra fine or the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and not a whole lot of shading coming through in the writing sample for the medium. 19 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows us plenty of color variation looking far left to far right. The scrubby of the medium doesn't show us a ton, but it's alright because there was none up here, and what we got in the extra fine matched the scrubby. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this really flees up the filter paper. It's going away from the water as much as it possibly can. And it's a full magenta all the way up. However, if you look at the very, very tip top, on the far left side and on the far right side, you see this tiny hint of a very, very light turquoise that shows up there. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And there's really no difference between these two chromatographies, which leads me to say there's going to be no resistance of this ink.
But I do want to draw your attention to the very top of it. You really can see the very light turquoisey color there a little bit better here than you could on the first chromatography.
Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it.
Looking at the highlighter, we're following the trends with the Wancher inks. Don't use it for note-taking if you want to go back and highlight, because you're going to kill your notes. Water is reactivating and lifting this entirely off the paper. Now we're seeing the white of the paper come through, which means given a little bit more than 30 seconds of the water just sitting there, and we can get this all to go away. Pen Flush does everything that water does and nothing more. 1/3 bleach solution does completely remove it from the paper and leave a different kind of staining behind. Now here's what I've come to believe about some of the staining sometimes, because I believe these Wancher inks to be pigmented inks, and I think the staining that we get from the bleach, or of the 1/3 bleach solution sometimes on these, comes from some pigmented particles responding with the bleach. I believe that's what it could be. If you have a better explanation of exactly what does that, please let me know in the comments down below.
I test viscosity or flow with a tilt test that I'll link down below in a description or in a card. Now for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9.
Wancher Original Ebine Violet has a viscosity of 2.79, making it normal.
To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all of those. Now for the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds.
Wancher Original Ebine Violet has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it still normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Wancher's Original Ebine Violet, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted a nice dusty purple. I went with Birmingham Pen Company's David O. Selznick Lilac Wind.
The second writing sample is done on Apica, Fabriano, and Field Notes.
Here we're looking at Apica CD notebooks, where I went ahead and I butchered them for this. Now we get no bleeding. But it seeps deep into the page. It is nowhere near bleeding, but there's dots where it's coming deep. So, not a real problem. It really doesn't cause major ghosting things that would stop you at all from using the back of the page. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It definitely is offering some shading. Look at Ebine. Very light, a very dark, nice mid-tone. The word violet is an entirely different tone than the word Wancher. The extra fine is quite a bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and great shading throughout. Brown starts dark and gets light. Fox starts light and gets dark. Jumps starts light and gets dark. Nice shading throughout, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a lot darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and really no shading. It gets lost for being so dark. 20 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine, looking far left to far right, shows us some color variation, and we got it. The medium shows us none, and we got none. How about Fabriano Echo Qua? No bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1, a very light tone with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 4 seconds to dry. The medium is a lot darker than the extra fine or the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. Field Notes. So we get some spots deep into the page. Definitely not anything that stops you from using the back of the page. Nowhere near touching the next page. It could mean that those spots could bother you a little bit, leading to a little bit of ghosting, but really this is performing very well here. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is darker than the stub with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. Very absorbent paper. Now the medium is way darker than the extra fine or the stub. It has ridiculous feathering all over it. So while these two are drier writing than this one, it's more like a wet, medium flow, and dry flow. The wet flow, really, with this being such an absorbent paper, let it feather like crazy. No spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 2 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine looking far left to far right shows some color variation, although we're not getting it. The medium far left to far right showing some color variation, and we definitely don't get it. And that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Wancher's Ebine Violet? I like this one. It's a very nice alternative to red ink. It looks nice on the page as a magenta that does just a little hint towards purple. It's a very interesting tone to look at that does offer some nice shading from time to time. So what pen and nib would give the best writing experience with this ink? I don't think it matters. I think a stub would look best, but I think every pen I used it in gave pretty decent shading, which means if you want your magenta to have some shading, this is a really good one to use. I certainly prefer it in a stub though. I do new ink reviews every single day, so if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.